Welcome to my Easter talk, Crucifixion and Sacrifice, Healing Trauma and a Spiritual Awakening. I intended to do this talk as a live Zoom that people could join to give donations to this sanctuary that I'm sitting in right now, which is the sanctuary of the Land of the Beloved Heart. And behind me, you can see the ruin there. That's going to become this. Well, it is the Sun Heart Temple in the world of light. And maybe in my lifetime, or maybe in the future generations, it will become the physical Sun Heart Temple. And I wanted to, record these lives to support these changing times that are happening, but also to receive donation towards the sanctuary. And I called these what could be called satsangs, or sermons, or talks, or sharings on a spiritual level. And I just couldn't really get my head around scheduling in Zoom calls and even asking for donation, because I just need to be in the moment with what's being shared. These are hugely changing times and everything is evolving rapidly. And I just wanted to take a moment when I felt it to speak. So I'm just recording it, and you will be receiving it on my YouTube channel, Sun Heart Temple, and my other YouTube channel, Eartha Love. So the first thing I want to say is that this is not me saying how I think it is, or having an opinion, or trying to be the teacher. Or one thing that put me off doing the live Zooms was that I wanted to, there's so many people teaching on coaching online now in the spiritual community. There's so many people that have got their opinions and their way of seeing the world and their belief system, and there's just so much information. So I'm just going to share from my heart something that is coming up for me in my own healing work as a spiritual, what could be called a spiritual teacher, a mystic, a shamanka, female shaman. But none of these words really touch the depth of what I'm feeling now as we really truly enter the time of prophecy. And I want to say also that I've been prepared for this time for the whole of my life, through the way I was brought up, through my father, through that lineage of my father line, through having an identical twin sister, Hannah, through being given my birth name, Love Universal of the Beloved, through my teachers, the Indigenous grandmothers, the women, the elders all over the world that I've learned from over the past 30 years, 27 years, and how I was being prepared for this prophecy that was unfolding, and to be building this temple that came through me to me in a series of miracles. But I'm sharing this from the place of what's coming up for me around the spiritual community, the New Age culture, and what I've been taught by the Indigenous grandmothers, and directly through my contact with Jesus, through my beloved who's in the afterlife. And for those of you who know me and know my work, my beloved Sun Heart, and the experience of being with him at his death. And so I call this work the living resurrection, not only because of what I'm going to share, but also because I'm building this sanctuary. The sanctuary is here already. in the land of Portugal, which is holding the legacy of the Knights Templar who were practicing the rites of death and resurrection. And I was awakened to this fully through the death of my beloved and the sacred marriage that we share. And what is called in the Indigenous teachings that I've received, something called Yanantin, which is also the sacred marriage, the divine union, the bringing of wholeness to duality, whether that's men, women, light, dark, whether it's good, evil. And for those of you who know me, I have a Yanantin with my sister Hannah, my identical twin. And I've also got another Yanantin with Jason, who's my beloved on the earth plane. And so it's been really my strong path of going on this painful journey of being crucified and experiencing death and sacrifice to really integrate all of the teachings that I've received from the Indigenous people all over the world, and the awakening to Apo Yeshu Christo, as I call Jesus, and the path of the holy bloodline of the family of David, and my name being that, from the holy bloodline, my birth name, I mean. And so I want to start with, the living resurrection and how that fits in with what I'm calling this talk, this satsang, which is crucifixion and sacrifice, healing trauma and spiritual awakening. And I want to start off with sharing it from the place of what's happening in the New Age community and the awakening of people, the human family, to Jesus and the Christian faith. And, while I'm saying that, it covers all faiths as far as I'm concerned. And it's the path of the mystic, the core mystical teachings, when you go way back all over the world, and where that actually comes from. And how, for me, there's a marriage within us of the indigenous wisdom, the mystical indigenous wisdom of this earth, and the mystical teachings of heaven through Yeshua and through other faiths, like the Sufis, for example, and the Andean mystical tradition, which I've had hardcore training in. And I want to share from a place of what I feel in my own personal journey, why some of you might have noticed, or maybe not, that Hannah and I have stepped right back from the huge group work that we were doing before. And we have the Sun Heart Temple School. I have the Map of Womanhood School. Hannah has her Mirror 4 School. And how we've brought it right back to one-to-one apprenticeships. And I'm going to explain the reason for this. Is because what I see happening now at this time of prophecy is something that I never was prepared for in the preparation of me for these times by all of my teachers and my lineage. And that is that the old paradigm has infiltrated the New Age community. And the reason why it's infiltrated the New Age community from the perspective of the Western psyche and Indigenous wisdom and the path of integration and embodiment, and how we conceptualize Indigenous wisdom because of our cultural trauma, and how we're not integrating the teachings that we've received from the Indigenous people because we simply can't, because we've got so much cultural trauma. And so that's why people talk about cultural appropriation and the colonization of the sacred. And that's the turning inside out of the spiritual medicine that the grandmothers told Hannah and I would happen because of the distortion of the Western psyche. And I understood what they were saying at the time, but I've been very naive in my younger years when I left the mainstream culture at well, as soon as I left home and entered the alternative and spiritual communities. And I know, obviously, this is a process of bringing duality into wholeness. So it's a necessary part of our evolution to go through this distortion and the new age culture. But that means that once you're awakened to it, which is what's happening to everyone, you have to start speaking so that we together in the West can really begin to take responsibility for what I call the waking up within the waking up. So obviously, the spiritual community and the New Age movement have thought that they've been awake. And for me, when I entered into this realm when I was younger, I felt that we were on the trajectory of being spiritually awake. But it took me actually being with the Indigenous grandmothers who never ever put themselves in a hierarchy. They've never ever felt of themselves as the guru. They've never sat above everyone else as the teachers while everyone else has sat on the floor. They've held the space of wisdom that they've attained through their experiences, through their culture, through their traditions, and their place as the elders in their community. And they've also recognized that their place is sitting within the circle. But that does not mean that they are not recognized as the teachers that are leaving the legacy that we need to receive to be able to evolve and to grow and come back into right relation. And I think the reason why the guru thing has got so distorted is the same reason that the New Age culture has got so distorted, is that what's happened is the spiritual teachings, the core mystical teachings of all traditions and all people has been received into the mind of man and distorted through trauma and then never being fully integrated and embodied. And that's how, cultures that don't have rites of passage ceremonies, the young people can get to the end of their teenage years. And I've talked about this before in my work, my schools, I teach this, that they're so susceptible to cults or cult-like experience is because we've never made it to adulthood. And I see this in other cultures that aren't in the West, right? This is the wisdom of the Indigenous people, is that they were so in a space of belonging with all of life and with each other that the way that they understood that we got to spiritual maturity was through rites of passage ceremonies that were held by the village and their embodiment of themselves within the conscious ecosystem of Gaia. Now, other cultures, as well as the Western culture, are so stuck in our minds and stuck in child, and we've never ever been able to grow up because we haven't got a culture of rites of passage and deep initiation. And what I'll get to in a minute, what rites of passage is and deep initiation is crucifixion and sacrifice and death, to allow ourselves to be resurrected into the light of who we truly are. So when the Indigenous wisdom and the traditions of the Indigenous people and the traditions of the saints, the teachings of the saints and the rishis enters into the mind of man and the psyche of man that is stuck in child, it cannot become spiritual maturity. It cannot become the resurrection of humanity, because the spiritual evolution is not allowed to happen. It cannot happen. And that's how gurus keep us in a place of needing them. Yes, 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 we need spiritual guides and spiritual teachers, but we need spiritual guides and teachers that are not putting themselves in the place of a hierarchy. that we can see clearly that they've worked through their own trauma and they've reached spiritual maturity enough to know that on the level of the conscious ecosystem of Gaia, that the intact indigenous people are integrated into just by their very nature, that they can receive those teachings, and that from that place of being a teacher, you're aware that you are part of the whole of Gaia, and that along with everybody else, and that keeps your ego in check because you're not outside of this conscious ecosystem of Gaia. You are. And then also at the same time, you're able to marry that integrated embodiment of ourselves as the conscious ecosystem of Gaia with the awareness and the full embodiment of ourselves as within the conscious ecosystem of heaven. I call it the conscious ecosystem of heaven. And I've deliberately received those words from my beloved in the afterlife to keep me grounded in the awareness of what that actually is. All of our souls together as one. So when we look at the saints, we look at the Essenes, we look at the original Christian mystics, we look at the Sufi mystics, and we look at the original saints of India. They were all aware of their place within the conscious ecosystem of heaven, the I am, the oneness, the dissolution. But what our path is while we're here on the earth is to marry those together, because it is truth. We have to awaken to the marriage that sits within us of the conscious ecosystem of Gaia and the soul of the world, and all of our belonging as sacred humans within this system, and the ecosystem of heaven, the I am, the oneness, God, Yeshua, Jesus, the Holy Father. We have to open our hearts to the marriage of that within us. It can't just be Christ. Christ did not teach separation. He didn't teach. He didn't put himself in the place of the guru above everyone else. He was in the village with everyone. He was the man that walked this earth, and his ultimate initiation and sacrifice was for all of us. And what I've experienced through the miracles of my own life, I was catapulted into the awareness of Christ, into the awareness of Apo Yesu Christo, through the crucifixion of myself and my beloved, and the crucifixion, the sacrifice of death, the dying of myself and the dying of Sunheart, and then being catapulted into the sacred marriage that sits within me so that I can live in heaven for the rest of my life with Jesus. But that does not deny the indigenous wisdom of the people of this earth. They did not see Christianity separate from their teachings. That was the Christian religion that has so if we go back to how the human mind conceptualizes, the Western psyche conceptualizes Jesus's teachings as well as the indigenous teachings. So the Western mind has taken the indigenous wisdom and conceptualized it and created the New Age culture. Now, the New Age culture, the New Age community is on the verge of collapse because it's turning inside out on itself. And of course that was going to happen because all the New Age community has done is taken the not all of the indigenous teachings, they've broken bits off because the Western psyche and the mind can only cope with certain teachings because we are stuck in child. We don't have the spiritual maturity because we live in a fragmented culture that does not recognize rites of passage. So what we've done is we've taken these teachings, we've broken the bits off that we can manage, right? We've left the profound truth of what it means when they say brother bear or sister waters. We've completely missed the way of the human being that they embody or the medicine that they embody. We've just broken bits off. We've taken it into our Western psyche, into our Western culture, and we've done the most demonic thing that you can think of, which is we've taken it into a career choice. We've taken it into wealth and coaching, right? Yes, we should receive and be valued for ourselves giving healing, ourselves being able to teach certain teachings, but we mustn't lose sight of the fact that that is spiritual immaturity in itself. That the way to God, the way to the new earth, the way to love, the way to Yeshua, the way to the Christ and the ecosystem of heaven and the Holy Father, being married to the indigenous wisdoms is not through making money. It's not through becoming a career, a life coach, telling people that they need to claim their wealth. Yes, I get it. We need to have money in the hands of the spiritual change makers, but where is the checking in with ourselves that are we really making the changes that are necessary on the earth? Or are we infiltrating spiritual teachings with the old paradigm of distortion of money, of career, of wealth? Are we not just doing the same as what the corporate businesses have done, but under the guise of spiritual teachings and soul awakening? And we all need to check in with ourselves about this. Why? Because all of us cannot comprehend what it feels like to be embodied within the ecosystem of the earth. We cannot feel what the indigenous people experience in their own lives because they are integrated. We're not. So we have to, our path in the West, I've had to go through a whole level of understanding, and so has Hannah, around why I was born into the heart of the oppressor when I felt like an Indigenous woman. And then I started the work becoming Native, and that was like 20 years ago now, which led on to the Map of Womanhood School, which then led on to the Sun Heart Temple School. And all of the time I was having hardcore shamanic training with Indigenous people. But what I've realized is that I have to integrate my teachers' teachings to me and my experience of being in the ecosystem of Gaia, my sense of belonging. I have to integrate all of that with my trauma, with my conditioning, and I have to bring it to wholeness inside of myself and integrate their teachings into my Western psyche so I can heal myself within our cultural fragmentation, and I can grow up and start to attain spiritual maturity through my initiations, through my own sacrifice, through the crucifixion of my ego as a Western woman, through the sacrifice of that experience of my own death and the death of my beloveds. so that I can wake up to the afterlife that is the ecosystem of heaven, that is the spiritual realms that the saints talked about. Otherwise, I'm just conceptualizing it all and I'm staying in the realm of distortion. And for me, that's the path that the indigenous people that I've trained with, the Andean tradition, are saying. They're bringing everything into wholeness. But what they need us to do is integrate the duality that sits within us. And that's a job of work. That takes, yes, we can spiritually awaken, but can we be spiritually mature within our awakening? Or are we going to distort it and think we're a guru? Are we going to distort it and think we're a spiritual teacher? Are we going to distort it and think we're here to have a career as a shaman? Are we going to distort it and think that it's all about wealth? Or are we going to truly claim our rightful place within this conscious ecosystem of Gaia as the Western people who are waking up and do the work of crucifying ourselves, being crucified, being sacrificed, dying to ourselves, going through the suffering, the sorrow of Our Lady of the Sorrows, the suffering of Christ, the initiation of the indigenous people, and wake up within the waking up and meet the ecosystem of heaven that sits within us and allow ourselves to really become the gift that is, what does Sun Heart tell me? To realize ourselves as a gift given to this earth from heaven as a sacred offering to life, and not here just to make money and to have a career. We are a gift given to this earth from heaven as a sacred offering to life, for life to thrive, for life to evolve and continue in a good way. And my biggest grief recently has been that the old paradigm has infiltrated this truth, and we're losing the plot. We're not reaching the living resurrection of ourselves. The Knights Templar that were here in Portugal were actually going through death and resurrection. They were having near-death experiences to be able to really bring back the teachings of the ecosystem of heaven and Christ onto the earth plane so that we could protect the holy bloodline and to marry it. And so now what we've got going on, so the New Age culture is collapsing because it's been distorted by the infiltration of greed and spiritual masturbation, I call it, and spiritual narcissism that comes when we bring money into spiritual teachings and the ego. And so it's collapsing, and you've got people waking up within the waking up to that and going back to Jesus and becoming part of the Christian faith. But when you look at what's happening, you can see that even the Christian faith, the return to Jesus, is also being conceptualized by the Western psyche. It's being distorted now. The teachings of Jesus, if you go back to the original teachings of the Gospel of Thomas, so even me speaking about it now, I know that the Inquisition within the minds of those people waking up to Jesus of the Christian faith that are now calling the New Age culture demonic and all there is Jesus will be slating me for what I'm saying. But what they're doing, I feel, is they are conceptualizing Jesus as well. So not only have some of these people started off in the New Age culture, they've become yoga teachers, they've become healers, they've become spiritual teachers in the New Age culture from the place of the child, because they've never ever healed the trauma of being brought up in a fragmented culture. They've never integrated the teachings that they've had of yoga. They've never integrated the teachings they've had of healing. They've never integrated the teachings that they've received. And what they've done is they've been a party to distorting it all, being a New Age teacher. And now they're saying it's demonic and that they've returned to Jesus, when in fact, The demons is the Western psyche, the Western mindset that is trying to be yoga teachers, spiritual teachers, shamans. They're trying to recreate the village and hold space from the place of the child, from the place of the teenager, because we've not had a culture of rites of passage. So how are we supposed to not be in a fragmented culture? So what's happening now is that those people that are moving out of the New Age culture and turning to Jesus are taking their same conceptualizing Western mindset that's stuck in child and stuck in teenager, and now thinking that they can teach the teachings of Jesus. And that not only that, that they can go to the New Age community and proclaim that they're demonic and that they're full of demons. And, like, let's bring it to plant spirit medicine and ayahuasca. They're saying it's demonic. I'm not going to say that I understand what these medicine communities are about, because it's not my path. But the demons are our own demons. They're the vast quantities of density that we've generated through our human mind. That is the opposite of light. It's the density of the human mind that comes together to form more density that then can be seen as demonic. But instead of taking responsibility for their own inner demons, they're saying that the plant is demonic, which then again, what they're doing is they're recreating the trauma of humanity that's already played out with the Inquisition and the witch burnings. So they're going back. Their Western psyche is taking, because it's stuck in child and fragmentation and teenager, because it's not had a culture of rites of passage that can truly feel the spiritual teachings of Jesus and the Holy Father. And it's becoming more separation. That in itself is demonic, because it's human mind distorting everything. So they're saying that the New Age culture is demonic, when what in fact is happening is they're being demonic. Their demons are now creating the same as what they created when they were in the New Age culture, which is distortion. And so the distortion of the indigenous people through the Western psyche, and people thinking they can be healers and teachers, is that that distortion has created the New Age culture. Now, those same Western minds are taking the distortion of heaven, the teachings of heaven, and distorting it through their Western psyche, and they're generating the Inquisition. And the human family has been going round and round in circles with this fated reality for thousands of years, and killing each other because of this fated reality of being a culture that does not integrate anything, because our minds are so, our soul, our minds, our heart is so fragmented through being a culture of soul loss, that we cannot bring anything to wholeness, because we've never ever reached our own wholeness through the journey of becoming an adult and becoming spiritually mature, becoming the awakening of the soul. Because the journey of being spiritually mature, the journey of being awakened soul, can't be separate from the journey of the sacred human, the way of the human being, which is tied, integrated and at one with the body, which sits within the ecosystem of Gaia. And heaven and earth are in complete reciprocity with each other within the ecosystem of the whole of the soul of the world. And one thing that Sunheart tells me is that we are the fragmented soul parts of the soul of the world that need to come home to Gaia. We are Gaia's, Pachamama's soul parts that are so fragmented that she cannot evolve until we come home to our rightful place within her soul. And we can't do that on our own, because we are the men and the women of the human family. The way of the human being is an intact ecosystem that fits within the ecosystem of heaven and the ecosystem of earth as one reciprocal truth of love. Heaven and earth, heaven and earth, and it sits within our hearts. And that's why I'm calling this the talk of healing trauma and spiritual awakening, because yes, we can wake up spiritually, but we're just up here. We can find our sense of belonging back into nature connection and all of life, but that's just down here. Within our bodies, our heart is the seat of our soul, is the bridge of the river of eternal love that flows through all of us, that then allows us to come back into oneness with each other and find our rightful place. And so the path of healing trauma is the path of spiritual awakening, because it takes suffering, just as Christ said, crucifixion of our ego, the suffering of our heart, to break our hearts open so much through so much pain and loss and sorrow, that we then are catapulted into the awareness of the love that sits between us all. And there is no separation there. There's no separation between the New Age culture and the Christian faith, and that it's all one mystical truth, and that even religion has distorted it into a dogma, because here sits the truth that when we are crucified, our hearts are broken open to more love, to true love. And in my work, in my one-to-one healing practice, everyone is coming to me with strong initiations that they're experiencing now in these changing times. And the only way to navigate it is to allow your heart to be completely broken open to the love that is there in the afterlife. But we can't feel the afterlife. We can't know the afterlife. We can't know heaven if we're still conceptualizing life, if we're still putting ourselves one step out of life, because we've never integrated the Indigenous teachings. So for me, the Western psyche is what's destroying the world, or the psyche of spiritual immaturity. Healing trauma through the suffering of yourself, awakening through the grief-founded reality of getting to heaven before you actually leave your body. That's how I can stay connected to Sanha. That's how I've got the miracles that I experience in my life of this land, this sanctuary, because through the breaking open of ourselves and the suffering of ourselves, Jesus is there. God is there, showing us how to be here fully integrated and embodied on the earth plane with all of life, with our brothers and sisters. And so as this New Age culture collapses, it's our responsibility to allow ourselves to die, to allow ourselves to be dissolved, and to allow ourselves to be catapulted into the afterlife, to move through the fear and the density and bring heaven here through the death of ourselves. And that's not going to take, going on a a course where you have to pay, $5,000, or you're listening to teachers who are living a life of wealth, or by becoming a life coach. It comes from being in mercy, from being on your knees, from being humble. Just makes me feel emotional, because that was the biggest gift to me, my beloved passing over and bringing me my beloved and the land as my beloved, and the sanctuary that I receive from the Holy Father and from Jesus and the Holy Mother and the Magdalena. Within this sanctuary, there is the origins of Indigenous wisdom, which is the wild land, and my rightful place within this land, and the union that sits within me of the sacred marriage of the Yanantin, and the path of bringing it all to wholeness. And I'm going to leave it there for now, but I think I'll do another talk for those that are interested about this journey that I had when I went out of my body, the near-death experience I had, where I went out of my body to the afterlife through my own suffering. And the meeting of the ecosystem of Gaia within the ecosystem of heaven. And if you've watched this all the way through, and it shows that you're really interested in what I'm saying, because I'm saying all of this because I can't be alone, surely, in what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And I'm reaching out to others who want to feel this new way forward that is the evolution of ourselves, the evolution of humanity, and the coming home together, and the getting out of this separation, the division, and the density as the new earth is being birthed through this crucifixion of ourselves, through the sacrifice of ourselves. And let's check in with ourselves as the people of the West, that we are not, and check in with each other, and to pull each other up on those moments where we feel the old paradigm infiltrating us, and to be mindful of what we are bringing forward, because I do believe that the prophecy of the new earth is going to come from, especially from the heart of the sisters of the West. But that means that we have to be humble. We have to be on our knees praying for mercy, to remember who we truly are, and to love each other again, and to check in with each other. And so I'm making this video as a prayer of connection, not as a prayer of I know, but a prayer of like, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? And I just, if you've watched it to this end, please leave a comment, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, especially the Sun Heart Temple one, because this to me is the work of the Sun Heart Temple within, and I'm building the Sun Heart Temple without here, which is a sanctuary. And I am trying to feel my way forward about how to hold this in a good way. So sending you all so much love, and thank you for listening if you got to the end. If you've got any questions, put it in the comments, because I've only just scratched the surface of what I could say as an introduction. To go deeper into what I'm saying, then I would value some questions. Thank you.